Hey y'all, it's Sam here with Beautiful Wreath. Today we're going to be making a magnolia wreath because y'all know we're in the South. If you don't know, now you know. We're going to make this magnolia wreath on a 24-inch evergreen wreath base from Hobby Lobby. So we're going to have this, of course, our evergreen base. We'll go ahead and put that to the side. 15-inch Home Sweet Home magnolia sign. We're going to be using 4 different ribbons. I have a 2.5 jute natural, 2.5 magnolia, 1.5 raised Swiss dot in army green, I believe it is, or a green with a black. I like to add that contrasting black in there. And then just a natural and white cabana stripe, 1.5. So we're going to be using 3 different mesh, white. This is a moss green, and then this is obviously a natural. This does have a border stripe. I'm not worried about that. I'm going to use this. I wanted to throw in a lighter green. This bush. I'm going to clip up some ficus leaves that are a little bit darker for contrast. I'll also use a couple of these little succulents. These, obviously, magnolias. So stay tuned and I'll show you how I make this magnolia wreath. I want to start off by cutting my mesh, but before I start cutting the mesh that I need, I want to cut off the jagged edges that come on the mesh when you open it out the pack. Next, I want to go ahead and layer the mesh on top of one another. I personally like to cut my mesh between 18 and 21 inches. So that's what I'm doing here. I just went ahead and did all of the mesh at 20 inches. I just measured out 20 inches across the board and did that for the entire project. People ask me why I have my mat this way instead of long ways, and it's because I've used it so much that I've cut a hole in it, even though it's a self-healing mat, and I have glue all over the 18 and 20-inch lines. So it always the mesh gets snagged if I have it long ways or horizontal instead of vertically. So that's why I have it that way. After I'm done with my mesh, I want to go ahead and set that aside. Side note, I cut 30 pieces to start off with, but I'll have to come back and cut some more because I'll tell you how many pieces I actually needed in just a minute. But as I'm getting ready to prepare the sign, I simply fold over a pipe cleaner. I fold it over about 1 inch, and that's just to give it a little extra stability before I staple it. As you can see, I'm measuring it just to be able to tell you. I fold it over about 1 inch and then just twist it in on itself. I'll show you again. I fold it over and then just twist it. That way it's a little bit sturdier whenever you go to staple it to the actual board. It's not as flimsy. Then I like to finish off with a little bit of glue to make sure that it really adheres to the board. Some people like to use the cable mount squares. I also like to use those. However, I am out. I need to order some more. So I'm just going to go ahead and make do with what I've got. And feel free to do that. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and grab my 24-inch evergreen base. As you can see, there are 2 rings. There's an inside ring and an outside ring. I'm pointing there. What I like to do is prep my wreath, and I like to separate the 2 rings. I like to separate the pines on the outside and the inside ring. As you can see, it's starting to fluff out because whenever you start to put your mesh in, It's a lot easier to do it if it's all fluffed out and you get a lot more of an even base. So the method that I use here, I didn't want to just slow this down. I went ahead and sped it up, is very typical. You can go back and watch some of my other videos, is the Cruffle method. And that's simply where I take the 20-inch strips and just cruffle them in on themselves. I just roll them in and I stick them to the very bottom of the base and then twist tie the pine ties to secure them to the base. And as a side note, I used 25 for the bottom ring or outer ring and 15 for the inside ring. Here you can see I am squishing it into an oval. That is my preferred method. I like the oval shape as opposed to the completely circular or round shape that the wreath comes in. Then I like to take a 22-inch zip tie. If you don't have a 22-inch zip tie, you can always take multiple smaller zip ties and connect them together and slip it on the inside ring. You're going to want to connect it to the inside ring. As you can see, I'm threading it through here. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just preferred method. And after you've done it for so long, it kind of becomes second nature. And you just do it the way you feel the most comfortable doing it. This doesn't help hold the shape. This is strictly to be able to anchor anything down. For instance, if I need to anchor the sign down, or if I need to anchor the bows or heavy florals or anything of that nature, I always just go ahead and start off with a zip tie in the center. And I also start off with a tie at the top of the wreath base so that the customer knows where to hang it. A little loop. I just take two of the pine ties at the top center and twist them together. The next step for me personally, and especially on this particular project, I wanted to go ahead and secure the sign to the base. I typically like to make sure that it's a little off-centered and a little cockeyed, kind of give it a little flair, a little flavor, you know? I don't want it to be straight because then you run the risk of imperfection, of seeing the imperfections. If you put something on there that's meant to be diagonal or that's meant to be imperfect, you can't really spot the imperfections, or at least it's harder to, in my opinion. Once your sign is secured, as you can see, I tied the pipe cleaners together. I thread them through the inner ring and just made sure that they were secured. I'll go ahead and cut off the excess pipe cleaners. I'll put those to the side just in case I need them for something else for this project. And then I'll fold over the pipe cleaner so it doesn't scratch anything. Right here, I like to add a little bit of glue to the sign, and then I like to squish my mesh to the sign. So I'll flip it over in just a second, and you'll see what I mean. So I added the glue to the back, and now I'm squishing the sign down just to help it adhere to the base. It just makes me feel a little bit more secure that the sign is not going anywhere. Then it's time to cut my ribbons. I like to start off with two of the ribbons that I'm going to use in the bow. I like to cut them at 13 inches. So I use a ribbon tail board. You can use whatever you've got on hand, or you can just measure each one out individually. I start off by cutting, since I'm only going to use two tails, I'm going to start off by cutting 14. So 7 tails of each ribbon. So you can see I'm cutting the magnolia ribbons here. I'm going to go ahead and dovetail them out. Once that's done, I'll go ahead and swap to the cabana stripe ribbon. We're going to utilize these on the outer ring. As I said earlier, I like to have an oval shape, but when you add ribbon tails to the outside, it does kind of give it back that circular shape. It just kind of fills it out a little bit more, and you'll see the final product. You'll see what I'm talking about. And it just kind of helps fill in a little bit of the gaps, but it's not too overpowering when when you're using one ribbon tail in each tie, if that makes sense. The old school way of doing it, and people still do this now, I still do it too, not as much, but where you put multiple 2 or 3 ribbons in each tie. Um, Here on this project, I'll be putting 1 ribbon in each tie. And when I say tie, I mean like pine ties. I fold my ribbon directly in half. I find a pine tie. Now, notice I said that I have 25 pieces of mesh on the outside ring, on the outer ring. I am not putting 1 ribbon in every single pine tie that has a piece of mesh. I'm just kind of eyeballing it and trying to spread them out evenly because I have 14. Here, I went ahead and made my bow, and I want to add it to the corner. of either side of my sign, or actually add two different bows to both corners of the sign. And I like that little drapey look where I drape the excess ribbon down at the center of the wreath at the bottom, because it draws the eye down, and that's what we essentially want to do, is draw the eye down. Now that we're done putting our bows and our ribbons and our wreath, I'm going to go ahead and steam out my magnolias. And it just makes all the difference in the world. If you see here the difference in the blooms between the unsteamed and the steamed. And then I'm also going to utilize the foliage on these magnolia bushes because it's just extra greenery that I need. And I'll go ahead and also clip up the bushes, so that way all of my greenery and flowers are cut, so I can go ahead and start gluing in my pieces. Also, if you've watched me for any length of time, you know that I will brag on the Still Pix machine. You can purchase a Still Pix machine, I believe, at Sam's Club, maybe online, and at Hobby Lobby, which is where I got mine. It is a lifesaver. I use mine on almost every project, probably 99%. So now it's time to go ahead and start adding florals. I went ahead and added the succulents first. Then I started with greenery for this particular project because everything was pretty even. It was pretty symmetrical, in other words. I went ahead and started adding greenery at the bottom and just kind of worked my way up. I like to typically work in a Z pattern or a triangle pattern. Sometimes I veer from that. Again, some people will tell you there is a right way to design. I, on the other hand, am a free thinker. I will tell you there's no right way other than the way that makes you most comfortable. And what makes you feel the best whenever you look at your finished piece. And I'm just going to work my way around, filling in all the gaps, just trying to green up my base. On this project, I definitely was not going to cover the entire base with greenery and florals. The customer's budget did not dictate that I had a huge amount of flowers and greenery to work with. So I always try to keep that in mind whenever designing based off of their budget. Is this going to be a heavy mesh design, or is this going to be a heavy floral and greenery design? And so when you look at some of my work, you can notice, on some of the pieces, you'll see more mesh, and that's because the budget is a lot less than on some of the pieces where you see a lot more greenery and more vibrant florals. And now I'm just adding in our magnolias. I'm just trying to evenly space them to where they're the most appealing, and again, drawing the eye down. It wouldn't be me if I didn't cut myself in the she shed shop on a daily basis. But my husband came in clutch with my first aid kit, so I bandaged up and got right back to work. And here's our finished project in natural light. I'm ecstatic with the way it came out. I hope that the customer loves it as much as I loved making this one. Hey, thanks for joining me today. If you got some value out of this tutorial, please consider giving me a like, a subscribe, and a share, and make sure you turn on your notifications so you know every time I upload a video. Y'all have a great one.